It was a quiet morning in the desert, the kind where the sun rose so slowly it felt like time itself had paused. The air shimmered with heat waves, and the only sound was the distant call of a hawk circling high above the endless expanse of sand and scrub brush. Somewhere along the dusty trail that cut through this barren land, there stood a donkey. Not just any donkey. This one was tied to a cart loaded with supplies, barrels of water, and crates of tools. But the donkey refused to move. For 3 days now, he hadn't budged an inch. No amount of coaxing or prodding could convince him to take another step forward. His owner, a wiry man named Hank, had tried everything. Sweet talk, threats, even a few well-placed kicks. Yet nothing worked. The stubborn animal simply stood there, ears flicking lazily at the flies buzzing around his head. Hank wiped the sweat from his brow with the back of his hand, leaving a streak of dirt across his already grimy face. "What's wrong with you?" he muttered under his breath, more out of frustration than curiosity. Little did he know, the answer lay buried beneath those very hooves. The journey had started innocently enough. Hank was heading west. Like so many others during those restless years of the late 19th century, he wasn't chasing gold or glory. No, Hank was practical, a prospector by trade, but not for precious metals. Instead, he sought valuable minerals and rare stones that could fetch decent prices in town. It wasn't glamorous work, but it paid the bills. Accompanying him on this trip was his trusty companion, the aforementioned donkey, whose name was never given much thought beyond that damn beast. Together, they'd travel hundreds of miles across deserts, over mountains, and through dense forests. They were used to hardship, but this strange standstill was something new entirely. By the second day, word of the situation had reached nearby ranches and camps. A group of curious travelers stopped to see what all the fuss was about. Among them was a tall, lanky cowboy named Jed McAllister, who leaned against his horse as if he owned the world. His sharp eyes scanned the scene before settling on the motionless donkey. "Looks like your critter's got himself stuck in some kind of funk," Jed drawled, tipping his hat back slightly. "You try offering him something good? Maybe a carrot or two." "I ain't got no carrots." Hank snapped, clearly losing patience. "And even if I did, I doubt it'd make a difference." Jed raised an eyebrow but said nothing further. Instead, he dismounted his horse and walked closer to inspect the situation. As he circled the donkey, his boots crunching softly against the dry earth, he noticed something peculiar. Beneath the donkey's hooves, the ground seemed different, compact, almost unnaturally hard compared to the surrounding soil. "That's odd," Jed murmured, crouching down for a better look. "What is?" Hank asked, suddenly intrigued despite himself. "This dirt here," Jed replied, running a finger along the surface. "Feels like it's been packed down real tight. Like maybe something heavy's been sitting here for a while." Hank frowned, glancing between Jed and the donkey. "Are you saying my donkey's standing on top of something?" "Could be," Jed said with a shrug. "Why don't we dig around a bit and find out?" At first, Hank hesitated. Digging in the middle of the desert didn't exactly scream productivity, especially when time was money. But after another fruitless attempt to get the donkey moving, he relented. With Jed's help, they grabbed shovels from the cart and began digging around the base of the donkey's hooves. The task proved harder than expected. The compacted dirt resisted their efforts, forcing them to dig deeper and wider until they uncovered something astonishing. Buried beneath the surface was a wooden chest, its lid partially cracked open. Inside, gleaming faintly in the sunlight, were rows upon rows of silver coins. Both men froze, staring at the treasure in stunned silence. "Well, I'll be damned." Jed finally broke the quiet, his voice low with disbelief. "Looks like your donkey found us a fortune." Hank blinked several times, unable to process what he was seeing. But why wouldn't he move? Why would he just stop like that? Jed chuckled softly, shaking his head. Animals are smarter than we give him credit for sometimes. Maybe, Donkey Dan here smelled the money or felt the vibration of the chest underneath him. Either way, he knew something was down there, and he wasn't going to leave until we figured it out. As the reality of their discovery sank in, Hank couldn't help but feel a mix of emotions. Relief washed over him, yes, but also a sense of awe and gratitude toward the creature he'd once dismissed as merely stubborn. Without the donkey's refusal to budge, they might have passed right by the hidden riches, without ever knowing. But then came the questions. Who had buried the chest? And why? Had it been left behind intentionally or abandoned in haste? The answers remained elusive, lost to time in the shifting sands of the desert. That night, under a sky blanketed with countless stars, Hank and Jed sat around a small campfire, discussing their next move. They agreed to split the treasure evenly, though both knew the journey home wouldn't be easy. Word of such wealth could attract unwanted attention, bandits, outlaws, or anyone desperate enough to claim it for themselves. Still, the prospect of starting anew filled them with hope. For Hank, it meant finally settling down, perhaps buying a piece of land where he could live peacefully. For Jed, it offered the chance to return to his family, whom he hadn't seen in years. As they talked, the donkey grazed nearby, seemingly unaware of the drama he'd sparked. But every now and then, Hank caught himself stealing glances at the animal, marveling at how much wisdom could reside in such a simple creature. In the end, the story of the donkey who refused to move became legend among the people of the Wild West. Some laughed at the absurdity of it, while others marveled at the mysterious ways fate could intervene. Whatever the case may be, one thing was certain. Sometimes the most unbelievable truths lie hidden right beneath our feet, waiting for someone or something to uncover them. The days that followed were anything but ordinary. With the discovery of the silver coins, Hank and Jed decided to press onward, their initial destination now altered by the weight of newfound riches. They loaded the chest carefully into the cart, ensuring it was secured tightly beneath a tarp to avoid drawing unnecessary attention. The donkey, seemingly content with his role as both guide and guardian, resumed his pace without hesitation, as if satisfied that his mission had been fulfilled. The trail ahead stretched endlessly before them, a ribbon of dust cutting through the heart of the desert. The sun blazed overhead, relentless in its heat, casting long shadows from the sparse cacti and sagebrush that dotted the landscape. Yet, despite the harsh conditions, there was an unspoken sense of excitement in the air, a feeling that they were on the brink of something far greater than either man could have imagined. By the third evening, they reached the edge of a vast canyon, its walls rising steeply into the sky like ancient sentinels guarding secrets untold. The ground beneath their feet shifted from sand to jagged rock, each step echoing faintly against the towering cliffs. As night fell, the stars emerged one by one, painting the heavens in a brilliance so vivid it seemed almost unreal. Around their small campfire, Hank and Jed sat in silence for a while, lost in thought. "I reckon we're getting close," Jed finally said, breaking the quiet. His voice carried a hint of unease, though he tried to mask it with casual indifference. "Close to what? I don't rightly know, but I feel in my bones." Hank nodded slowly, his eyes fixed on the flames dancing before him. "Yeah, me too. There's more to this treasure than meets the eye. Something about it doesn't sit right." Jed tilted his head, studying Hank intently. "You thinking maybe whoever buried it didn't do so willingly?" "It's possible," Hank replied, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. "Or maybe they were forced to leave it behind. Either way, someone out there might be looking for it, and us." The possibility hung heavy in the air, unspoken yet undeniable. They knew the dangers of the Wild West all too well. Bandits lurking in the shadows, corrupt lawmen willing to turn a blind eye for the right price, and desperate men driven mad by greed. In such a world, carrying a chest full of silver was akin to walking with a target painted across their backs. But retreat was not an option. They pressed forward, their journey taking them deeper into the canyon. The terrain grew increasingly treacherous, forcing them to navigate narrow paths carved precariously along the cliff edges. At times, the cart threatened to topple over, its wheels catching on loose stones or hidden roots. Through it all, the donkey remained steadfast, his steady gait a testament to his resilience. On the fifth day, they stumbled upon an abandoned mine shaft, its entrance partially collapsed and shrouded in vines. The air around it carried a strange chill, even in the sweltering heat of midday. Hank hesitated at the mouth of the tunnel, his instincts warning him against entering. "Something feels off about this place," he murmured, glancing back at Jed. Jed squinted, surveying the area carefully. Could just be old superstitions settling in. Minds like these always carry stories, ghosts, curses, you name it. But sometimes those tales hold a grain of truth. With caution bordering on reluctance, they ventured inside, their lanterns casting flickering light against the damp stone walls. The silence within was oppressive, broken only by the distant drip of water echoing eerily through the cavern. Deeper they went, until they reached a chamber unlike any other they'd seen before. Carved into the rock were symbols, ancient markings that neither man could decipher. "What is this?" Hank whispered, his voice barely audible. Jed shook his head, equally mystified. "Dunno, but whatever it is, it ain't natural." Little did they know, the answers they sought lay buried not only in the earth, but also in the past, a past that would soon come crashing into the present with devastating consequences. As they prepared to leave the mine, the sound of hoofbeats reverberated through the canyon outside. Both men froze, exchanging tense glances. Whoever approached was riding fast, and they weren't alone. "They found us," Jed muttered grimly, reaching instinctively for the revolver holstered at his side. Hank swallowed hard, his mind racing. "How many?" "Hard to tell," Jed replied, straining to hear over the pounding hooves. "But enough to cause trouble." In the chaos that ensued, the donkey once again proved his worth. When the attackers closed in, the animal brayed loudly, startling the intruders momentarily. A delay that gave Hank and Jed the precious seconds they needed to mount a defense. Bullets flew. Sparks danced off the rocks, and the canyon erupted into a symphony of violence. Yet amidst the turmoil, one question lingered in Hank's mind. Why had the donkey refused to move 3 days ago? Was it truly instinct guiding him, or was there something more, something supernatural perhaps, that had led them to the treasure? Only time would reveal the truth. For now, survival was paramount. And as the smoke cleared and the echoes faded, Hank couldn't help but wonder whether the real danger had truly passed, or if it was only beginning. The dust settled slowly, hanging in the air like a ghostly shroud as the echoes of gunfire faded into silence. Hank and Jed stood shoulder to shoulder, their breaths ragged, their hearts pounding in unison. The attackers, 5 men clad in tattered clothes and grim expressions, lay sprawled across the canyon floor, some motionless, others groaning in pain. The donkey brayed once more, loud and defiant, as if celebrating their narrow escape. Hank wiped the sweat from his brow with a trembling hand, his eyes scanning the scene before him. "We made it," he whispered, though the words fell hollow against the backdrop of blood and chaos. Jed holstered his revolver, his jaw tight with tension. "Yeah, but barely. Next time won't be so easy." His voice carried a weight that matched the gravity of their situation. They had survived this encounter, but the treasure they carried was a beacon drawing predators from every corner of the Wild West. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the jagged rocks, Hank knelt beside one of the wounded assailants. The man's face was twisted in agony, his chest rising and falling in shallow gasps. "Who sent you?" Hank demanded, his tone sharp enough to cut through the lingering haze of battle. The man laughed weakly, a sound that turned into a coughing fit. Blood trickled from the corner of his mouth. "You think you'll live long enough to find out?" he rasped, his voice laced with venomous amusement. Then his eyes rolled back, and he went still. Jed crouched beside Hank, his fingers brushing lightly over the dead man's coat pocket. He pulled out a small, folded piece of paper stained with dirt and grime. Unfolding it carefully, he squinted at the crude sketch etched onto the parchment, a map, incomplete but unmistakable in its purpose. "Looks like these boys were after more than just our silver," Jed murmured, his voice tinged with unease. "This map leads somewhere specific, and I bet my last dollar it ain't marked X for treasure." Hank studied the map over Jed's shoulder, his mind racing. The symbols carved into the walls of the abandoned mine flashed in his memory. The same strange markings appeared faintly on the edges of the map. A chill ran down his spine. What if we've stumbled onto something bigger than either of us realized? What if this isn't just about money? Jed straightened, tucking the map safely into his own coat. "Then we'd best figure out quick. Because whoever those men work for, they're not going to stop until they get what they came for." The night passed in uneasy watchfulness. with both men taking turns guarding the camp while the others slept fitfully. The donkey, ever vigilant, kept close to the cart, his ears twitching at every rustle of the wind or distant howl of a coyote. By morning, they decided to press onward, leaving the bodies of their attackers behind as a grim reminder of the perils that lurked in pursuit of their newfound wealth. Their path led them toward an old trading post nestled at the base of a mountain range. Its wooden sign, whether by time and neglect, read Crossroads Mercantile. Smoke curled lazily from the chimney of the main building, and a few horses grazed lazily in the corral nearby. It seemed peaceful enough, but appearances could be deceiving. Inside, the mercantile buzzed with activity despite the early hour. Merchants haggled with customers. Children darted between barrels stacked high with goods, and the scent of freshly baked bread mingled with the tang of leather and gunpowder. At the counter, an elderly woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor presided over the transactions. Hank approached her cautiously, his hands resting lightly on the edge of the counter. "Ma'am, we're looking for information," he began, his voice low and measured. "Anything you might know about a hidden mine or something unusual in these parts." The woman raised an eyebrow, her gaze piercing. "Unusual, you say? This whole region's built on unusual. You'll need to be more specific than that. Young man." Jed stepped forward, producing the map from his coat. He unfolded it slowly, placing it gently on the counter. The woman leaned closer, her expression unreadable as she examined the sketch. She mused after a moment, tapping a finger against the paper. "This here looks familiar. Seen it before, though never in such poor condition. That symbol there," she pointed to one of the ancient markings, "isn't from around here. Comes from farther south, where the Apaches used to carve warnings into stone." "Warnings?" Hank echoed, his interest piqued despite himself. "Aye, warnings. About places best left undisturbed. Some claim those marks point to cursed lands. Others say they guard treasures beyond imagination. Either way, folks who go poking around tend not to come back." A cold knot formed in Hank's stomach. "Do you know where this place is?" The woman hesitated, glancing between the two men, before nodding reluctantly. "There's a trail that winds up through the mountains. Follow it far enough, and you'll find yourself at the foot of Devil's Spire. A peak so steep even goats avoid it. If your map's right, whatever you're searching for lies near its summit." By midday, they found themselves ascending the treacherous trail described by the merchant. The air grew cooler as they climbed higher, the trees thickening around them until sunlight filtered only sparingly through the canopy above. Birds sang melodiously in the distance, their voices weaving a haunting melody that seemed almost otherworldly. At one point, the donkey halted abruptly, refusing to take another step. Hank sighed heavily, already weary of the animal's antics. "Not again," he muttered, stepping forward to coax the stubborn creature onward. But then he saw it, a glimmer of light reflecting off something metallic embedded in the ground. Kneeling, he brushed away the loose soil to reveal another chest, smaller but identical in design to the one they discovered days earlier. Inside lay not coins but scrolls, their parchment brittle with age and covered in the same mysterious symbols. "What do you make of this?" Hank asked, holding up one of the scrolls for Jed to see. Jed frowned, studying the markings closely. "Looks like writing, but none I've ever seen. Maybe it's some kind of code, or maybe it tells us why people keep coming after us." Before they could delve deeper into the mystery, a low growl reverberated through the forest. From the shadows emerged a wolf-like creature, its fur matted and its teeth bared menacingly. It circled them warily, its yellow eyes gleaming with hunger and malice. Hank reached instinctively for his pistol, but Jed held up a hand, signaling caution. "Don't shoot unless you have to. Something about this feels unnatural." As the creature advanced, the donkey brayed loudly once more, startling the beast into retreating momentarily. Seizing the opportunity, Hank and Jed gathered the scrolls and hurried onward, the ominous presence of the creature lingering in their minds long after it vanished into the underbrush. Hours later, they reached the base of Devil's Spire, its jagged peak piercing the sky like a spear aimed at the heavens. A cave yawned open at its foot, dark and foreboding, inviting yet repelling all who dared approach. The donkey stopped once more, this time without prompting, standing steadfast, as if rooted to the spot. "This is it," Jed breathed, his voice barely audible. "Whatever we're meant to find or uncover, it's in there." With trepidation gripping their hearts, they ventured inside, their lanterns illuminating the cavern wall by wall. Deep within, they discovered a chamber unlike any other. A temple of sorts, its interior adorned with carvings depicting scenes of celestial beings descending upon the earth. In the center stood an altar, upon which rested a single object, a golden key, ornate and intricate, glowing faintly with an inner light. And then, from the shadows, a voice spoke, not human, but deep and resonant, echoing to the chamber like thunder. "You have done well to reach this place," it intoned. "But know this, the power you seek comes at a price. Are you prepared to pay it?" Hank and Jed exchanged a glance, their faces pale but resolute. For better or worse, they had come too far to turn back now. Little did they know, the true test of their courage and their souls was only beginning. The voice reverberated through the chamber, sending chills down Hank and Jed's spines. It was neither male nor female, neither young nor old, just a presence that seemed to fill every corner of the cavern with its weight. The golden key on the altar pulsed faintly, as if alive, responding to the unseen entity's words. "What price?" Hank called out, his voice steady despite the fear coiling in his stomach. He tightened his grip on the lantern, its flickering light casting dancing shadows against the ancient carvings on the walls. "The price," the voice answered, its tone deepening, "is sacrifice. To claim what lies beyond this door, one among you must remain behind." Hank's heart sank. Sacrifice? Remain behind? His mind raced, trying to make sense of the cryptic demand. Beside him, Jed shifted uneasily, his hand instinctively moving toward a revolver at his hip. "Behind? You mean trapped here?" Jed asked, his voice tinged with disbelief. "You're asking us to leave someone here forever?" "Forever is but a word," the voice replied smoothly. "Time flows differently in this place. For the one who stays, moments may stretch into eternity, or collapse into nothingness. But for those who pass through the door, the world awaits." Hank glanced at Jed, their eyes locking briefly before turning back to the altar. The golden key shimmered temptingly, its glow almost hypnotic. Whatever lay beyond that door promised answers, riches, perhaps even salvation. But at what cost? "We don't have to decide now," Jed whispered, leaning closer to Hank. "We can take the key and run. Maybe it'll work without." "No," Hank interrupted sharply, though quietly. "If we do that, we risk everything. This thing knows we're here. If we try to cheat it, who knows what will happen?" Jed nodded reluctantly, understanding the logic even if he didn't like it. They were backed into a corner, forced to face an impossible choice. One of them would have to stay behind while the other moved forward. But which one? The silence stretched between them, heavy and oppressive. Finally, it was Jed who broke it. "All right," he said, stepping forward. "If someone has to stay, let it be me. I've lived my life. You still got plans, Hank, a future worth fighting for." Hank stared at him, stunned by the selflessness in his friend's words. "Are you crazy? I ain't letting you do this alone. Besides, how do we even know this thing isn't lying? What if neither of us gets out alive?" "It doesn't matter," Jed insisted, his voice firm. "Someone's got to step up. And if it's going to be me, so be it." Before Hank could protest further, Jed approached the altar, his boots crunching softly against the stone floor. He stopped just short of the golden key, looking back at Hank with a grim smile. "Take care of yourself, partner. Don't waste this chance." But then, something unexpected happened. The donkey brayed loudly from where it stood near the entrance of the cavern, its sound echoing off the walls. Both men turned to see the animal straining against its tether, pawing at the ground anxiously. "What's gotten into you now?" Hank muttered, more out of habit than irritation. As he watched, however, the donkey did something extraordinary. It spoke. Or rather, the air around the donkey shimmered, and a figure emerged, a tall, ethereal being cloaked in flowing robes that seemed to ripple like water. Its face was obscured beneath a hood, but its presence commanded attention. "You misunderstand," the figure intoned, its voice calm yet commanding. "The sacrifice need not come from you. There are others willing to bear the burden." Hank blinked, certain he was dreaming. "Who? What are you talking about?" The figure gestured toward the donkey, whose form began to shift and change before their very eyes. Fur melted away. Hooves transformed into hands, and within moments, standing before them was no longer an animal but a man, a wiry, weathered man with kind eyes and a knowing smile. "I am Darius." The former donkey introduced himself, bowing slightly. "And I have been waiting for this moment far longer than either of you can imagine." Hank and Jed exchanged bewildered glances, struggling to process what they were seeing. A talking donkey? A hidden guardian? None of it made sense, yet none of it felt entirely unbelievable either, not after everything they'd already witnessed. Darius explained that he had once been a traveler, much like Hank and Jed, seeking knowledge and wisdom in the vast wilderness. Centuries ago, he had stumbled upon the same temple they now stood in and accepted the challenge posed by the ancient power that resided within. In return for protecting the treasure and guiding worthy souls to its door, he had been transformed into a donkey, a humble yet enduring form capable of surviving the test of time. "But my task is nearly complete," Darius continued, his voice soft but resolute. "You two have proven yourselves worthy, not only of passing through the door, but also of carrying the truth of this place into the world above. If you succeed, the curse will lift, and I will regain my true form." Hank frowned, still grappling with the enormity of the revelation. "So, you're saying you've been stuck as a donkey all this time, just to help people like us?" Darius chuckled lightly. "In a manner of speaking, yes, though I admit the stubbornness came naturally." A reluctant laugh escaped Hank's lips, followed by a sigh. "Well, I guess we owe you more than we thought." Darius inclined his head. "Indeed. Now, the decision rests with you both. Will you accept the challenge, or will you walk away?" After a long moment of deliberation, Hank and Jed agreed to proceed. Together, they placed a golden key into the lock embedded in the altar, turning it slowly. With a deafening rumble, the wall behind the altar split apart, revealing a narrow passage leading upward. Light poured from the opening, blinding and warm, carrying with it the promise of new beginnings. As they stepped forward, Darius remained behind, his form beginning to shimmer once more. "Go forth," he urged, his voice filled with hope. "And remember, the greatest treasures are not always found in gold or silver, but in the bonds we forged along the way." With one final glance back at their unlikely companion, Hank and Jed disappeared into the light, leaving the cavern and its mysteries behind. When they emerged, they found themselves atop Devil's Spire, bathed in the golden glow of dawn. Below stretched a breathtaking vista of rolling hills, glistening rivers, and sprawling plains. Somewhere in the distance, smoke rose from towns and villages, evidence of life continuing as it always had. But something had changed within them. The journey had tested their courage, challenged their beliefs, and forged a bond between them that would endure long after memory of the golden key faded. And though they never saw Darius again, they carried his lessons with them, sharing the tale of the donkey who refused to move for 3 days until they dug beneath his hooves and uncovered truths greater than any treasure chest could hold.